Hey there! Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will show you how to do a content audit for a new customer or when you join a new company. If you've watched my previous video on the 30, 60, 90-day plan, you already know that the content audit is part of the analysis phase. That comes after the orientation phase, which is usually in your first 2 or 3 weeks. The goal of the content audit is to give you the big picture overview of all the content their client has or a website has, and to help you understand performance. Of course, to measure performance, you need to know what the general business goals are and what the marketing goals are. I work mostly with B2B SaaS companies, so the goals are usually related to revenue, pipeline, opportunities, and leads. That means that when I perform the content audit, I'm gonna look not just at metrics like impressions, page views, or visitors, but most importantly, at the revenue driven by content initiatives. If you're new to my channel, please like this video and subscribe. This way, you will get notified when I post new content. To make this easier to follow, I will structure the video in 2 parts. In the first part, I will walk you through my step-by-step process for performing the content audit, and in the second part, I will show you what I do with the insights extracted from this audit. So in the second part, I will show you the type of report that I usually deliver to stakeholders. That report will inform the content strategy. Okay, now we're good to go. Let's get started. What you see now on the screen is my working document. This is the template that I generally use when doing a content audit. At the bottom you see that I have an overview page, a report tab, and then some tabs for the raw data. I generally get data from tools like Google Analytics, Screaming Frog, Search Console, and Ahrefs. The data I use is mostly quantitative, so after that I need to do a couple of steps, either manually or using ChatGPT, to also evaluate the quality of content. The overview page includes all the data, starting with the page URL, meta title and meta description, content type, the topic or use case, the user intent, and then we move into metrics such as the funnel stage, clicks, impressions, click-through rate, position, users, sessions, page views, pages per session, conversions, page value, and conversion rate. If revenue numbers are also available, I analyze them in this step as well. Let me now walk you through the raw data before I dive deeper into this table. First, from Google Analytics, I pull data such as the landing page or the page path, the number of sessions, of users, the bounce rate, the number of pages per session, the average session duration, the sign-up conversion rate, the number of sign-ups, and the value of a sign-up. Next, from Screaming Frog, I usually get again the page path, then the status code to understand if there are broken pages, the page title and meta description, as well as the word count. From Search Console, I get the page title or the page path, and impressions, clicks, click-through rate, and average position. Depending on what data is available, I also pull conversions from either HubSpot or Google Analytics, and I look at the top performing keywords from Ahrefs. The numbers in this particular report come from an actual content audit, although I replaced the page titles, the page names, and meta descriptions with dummy data. Now let's look again at the overview table. As I said, some of the columns here require some manual input, or automated input if you use ChatGPT. For example, for the content type, I use a series of values that are personalized for the website that I'm analyzing. You can see that in this case I have blog articles, consultant landing pages, tool landing pages, advice landing pages, and so on. Then for the topic or use case of the page, I choose between things like platform related, find an expert, startup, SEO, and so on. This will vary a lot depending on the website that you analyze. So there are no standard values for the topic or the use case that the page will talk about. For the content type, however, it's a bit more standardized. Finally, for user intent, I choose again from a couple of predefined values, such as learn about platform, solve a pain point, learn about the topic, see how others solve the pain point, and so on. The funnel stages are always the same. top, middle, and bottom of the funnel. As you can see here, I have some duplicate columns. Content type, this is where the manual input was added, and then content type GPT. For these purple columns, with the GPT added to the title, I used an extension called GPT for Sheets and Docs. To be able to use this extension, first you need to get your API key. If you click here on Set API Key, the extension will open in the sidebar, and you can click here to create an OpenAI API key if you don't have one already. I've already added mine, so I can start using this extension. Here you can see a list of GPT functions with a short explanation and an example. In my case, I only used GPT Classify because I want ChatGPT to help me classify the content type, the topic, and the user intent automatically. These 3 columns are usually very time intensive, so I'd rather do it automatically even though the results might vary a little. So, for example, in this case, I consider that the user intent is to become a member, while GPT says that the user intent is to learn about the platform. Of course, because I'm using dummy data, GPT will not know what is actually on the page. But if you're not happy with the output of GPT, you can always go in the cells and just edit the data manually. For the number columns, I like to use conditional formatting just to see the highest and lowest values a bit easier. For the GPT functions, I have here a tab called GPT Variables, where I add the values that GPT can use. For example, for content type, these are the values that it can choose from. For page types, here are the values, and for user intent, these are the values it can use. Finally, we have the Report tab. I will walk you through all of this just to show you what I usually look at when analyzing the content. I generally start with the amount of content, so the count of content type, the count of funnel stage or the coverage per funnel stage, search intent, and topic or use case. So how many pages talk about specific use cases, or how many pages have specific user intents. Then I look at impressions, and I use the same type of split per content type, funnel stage, search intent, and use case or topic. Of course, you might also want to add industry, audience segment, and so on, depending on the structure of your website. Then we have clicks, click-through rate, page views and conversions, number of new users, bounce rate, time on page, conversions, and conversion rates. This approach gives me a really good overview of content performance and helps me understand not only what content this website has and what is performing, but also what the gaps are. Now let's move on to the second part. As I said, the insights from this content audit will inform the content strategy. I will not show you how to create a content strategy in this video, but I will upload a new video for that topic specifically. Please subscribe to the channel to stay informed and see when I add new content. The content audit report is only the first part of the content strategy document. Other things that I include there are the target audiences, the themes and pain points, the content types, channels, KPIs and metrics, and the goals and next steps. Let's dive into the content audit report now. The report is shared with stakeholders, so it needs to show very clearly the current performance, the content gaps, and the next steps. For performance, I look at things like which types of content generate leads and customers, what types of conversions come from content, and how are we ranking for our focus keywords. Then for content gaps, I look at what funnel stages are the most saturated, what content types are missing, which topics are less covered, which search intents are less present, and so on. Depending on performance, I might also add some numbers from competitors. Finally, in the goals section, I look at what we want to achieve with content marketing. One of the first things I like to include in the content audit report is the content performance measurement. So, how do we know that the content is performing? I do this just to make sure everyone is aligned and on the same page regarding the metrics that we need to measure. So, for example, for a B2B SaaS company, we measure content performance through the number of leads generated through marketing efforts, or MQLs, the number of qualified leads, the number of opportunities, customers, and revenue generated. Leads can come from things like content downloads, contact forms sent, or demo requests. These metrics are relevant if you use a mix of inbound, outbound, and ABM methodologies, for example. But if you use a PLG motion, then you will look at different numbers. For example, instead of leads, you will look at the number of signups. Instead of qualified leads, you will look at the number of active users and paying users. And you will also look at your retention rates. After that first slide, I usually go to the actual insights from the content audit. I start with the funnel stages and show the coverage. So how much content do we have for the top, middle, and bottom of the funnel? It's very common for B2B SaaS websites to have mostly top of funnel content that is educational in nature and that brings traffic but doesn't lead to conversions. So when I create a content strategy, a recommendation could be to create more bottom and middle of the funnel content and less top of the funnel content. Next, I look at the search intent. Again, it is common for websites to have mostly educational content, also because it's just easier to create, and oftentimes the marketing team is disconnected from the product team. So writing articles such as what is this, definitions, glossaries, how does something work, is easier than creating product-focused content. However, when most of the content serves an educational intent, such as learning about a topic, the conversion rates will probably not be great, because it's usually commercial intent content such as learning about a solution, solving a pain point, or learning about a tool and finding a tool that drives the most conversion. Next, I look at industry focus or audience segments, use cases, or topics to see, again, the coverage. For example, if most of your content is not industry specific, but you actually target some verticals, it makes sense to create more content for those verticals and show how they solve their actual pain points instead of creating generic content. For content types, I often see that most of the content is just blog articles that are educational and created for the top of the funnel. However, for B2B SaaS companies, there's a lot of other content types that you can create and that have better performance. Also, if you're not generating leads or qualified leads or customers through your content, it could be that most of your content is just not created to generate leads or to drive conversions. So you should really look at your mix of content types. Next are the topics covered or the use cases. If you want to own a specific space or be found for some specific themes, you need to make sure you create content around those topics. But what I often see is websites with content that's super generic, targeting a lot of different topics and not having one clear focus. Finally, I look at the conversions driven by content. I like to split this in soft conversions and hard conversions, where soft conversions are things like downloads or subscriptions or registering for webinars and events, and hard conversions could be contact forms or demo requests. As I said earlier, in a PLG motion, a hard conversion would be a sign-up. Next, I like to split the conversions per content type and to see which content does well in terms of leads generated and in terms of opportunities created and revenue driven. Another thing I like to do is to look at the content conversions by funnel stage and by search intent. Content conversions are things like ebooks or white paper downloads or subscriptions. In the same way, I look at product conversions by funnel stage and search intent. Product conversions could be signups or demo requests. Then I like to look at the overall performance of the funnel or how the funnel converts. So, for example, the top of the funnel content will probably generate mostly content conversions, but the middle of the funnel should lead to demo requests or contact requests. Same for the bottom of the funnel, where we should see signups or demo requests. I also look at the click-through rate for each funnel stage and search intent. This tells me which content needs optimization. For example, it could be that we get a lot of impressions but not enough clicks, so the click-through rates are low. This might mean that the titles and descriptions, or meta titles and meta descriptions, need to be optimized, and that the content overall needs optimization. Next, I look at rankings for target keywords to understand how present we are in search engines. In general, content that doesn't rank in top 6 will not get clicks. Another thing I include in the content audit is the form conversion. So how are the different forms converting? Finally, I go to segments. And I look at things like organic versus paid versus referral traffic. So what is the demo conversion rate? What is the subscription conversion rate? Contact form and download conversion rate. This helps me understand how each channel or traffic source is performing. Staying within segmentation, I also look at new versus returning users. And I analyze hard and soft conversions for each of these segments. Another thing I like to include are the soft and hard conversions for blog readers versus non-blog readers, to understand whether a particular website does need to have a blog or if other channels are better for reaching their target audience. Finally, I look at content consumption patterns, and I analyze things like what happens with users or visitors who see more than 3 pages versus those who see less than 3 pages. For example, are we getting more demo conversions from those who consume more content, or is content consumption not influencing our conversion rates? All these insights help me understand content performance and find content gaps. But I will not cover that in this video, so please subscribe to my channel to stay informed and see when I upload new content. And if you found this useful, please like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.